You may decide you want to learn more about SQL Server's always-on groups or AGs, but asking someone for a network setup so you can practice won't be at the top of anyone's to-do list. Stick around. I'll show you how you can quickly set up a mini sandbox on your very own laptop and get the practice and understanding you need. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's take a look at the network first. You're going to need a DC, a SQL Server 1, a SQL Server 2, and a SQL Dev box. So those will be VMs that we'll set up inside a Virtualbox. You also need to set up a SQL group, and I'll show you how to do that. Some prerequisites: you'll need Virtualbox, you'll need Windows Server 2016, the ISO SQL Server 2017 Developer Edition, SQL Server Management Studio, and a laptop or desktop with enough resources to host 4 VMs. Here's a quick checklist, and we'll go through this as we go along in this video. First thing we'll do is download Windows 2016 Server. And the reason I bring this up is because I want to make sure that you download the right version here. You want to grab the ISO and not the Azure or Virtual Labs. Go ahead and fill out the right information. If you don't see this, that probably means that you've already either downloaded this and there hasn't been enough time that's passed up, or some other reason. Go ahead and download it to ISOs or anywhere else that you can remember. For me, it's ISO. Let's go ahead and create the virtual machine. So click New, name it DC, give it some memory. I'd give it probably 2 gigs of memory. Select the defaults for the box, and then give it a hard drive of maybe 25 gigs. Once we're done with that, let's go into settings on the Virtualbox, and we'll make sure that the network settings are correct. So we'll do an internal network here. So internal network, and just make sure it's connected with the adapter type, the cable's connected. Once you restart, you'll include the ISO file for Windows Server 2016. And you're going to use the Data Center Edition. It's going to be the desktop version, so you'll drop it all the way down to the very bottom one and select that one. If you do any of the other ones that don't say desktop version, you're installing the Core Edition. You don't want to do that unless these are just Core Edition Windows OS. Go ahead and do custom install. And this will take a few minutes, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how robust your laptop is. Some of you may get it to work faster. And I'll kind of speed this up here so that we can, one more moment. Next, after we've put in a good password here. Next thing we do is install the guest edition for Virtualbox. This will be good for you for being able to manipulate your screens the right way, and for adding network shares. It's a good piece to add for various reasons. So it's in devices, and find the ISO, and then go through setup. Maybe take about 3 to 5 minutes to do this. Believe me, it's worth it. Get it installed. Will require a reboot. Everything does. We'll change the computer name to DC. So go to New Server. And then changing the name does require a restart. Then the next thing we'll do is we'll come in and we'll change up the IP addresses by going to the lower right hand corner to network settings, and we'll change it to 192.168, the IP for 192.168.10.1, and the subnet mask, it's going to be the same for all virtual servers, so just make them 255, 255, 255, 0, and the preferred is going to be the same as what the DNS was. I would recommend you turn off the firewalls since this is our lab. I don't want anything that might be because of a firewall setting to get in the way of our lab. We'll also go and add the Active Directory. So over in the right hand corner you'll see that you can add it. After we've added the firewall, we want to, or configure the firewall so that we don't use it. The next thing we'll do is we'll add Active Directory domain services as a feature in our role, and then also the DNS server. So go up, add roles and features, drop it down. Usually these are all defaults that you want to go through. Active Directory domain and services, add features, and then DNS server, of course, we want to add. Just click next to install it. Next thing you'll do is you'll add it to a trust that you know of, and we decided we were going to add it to the SQL.devbox.net domain. That was going to be our forest. So let's just get that configured here in the domain name. So it's SQL.devbox.net. Go next for the deployment configuration. Take it a few moments. A couple other things. You want to give it a password for the type the directory services restore mode, the DSRM password. Just something you can remember. Set the NetBIOS name to like SQL. And then I would just leave everything just like it is. Remember, it's going on your Virtualbox. Keep it simple. Does the install. Then it'll sign us out because it's going to restart everything. Good. Then sign in. This time we're going to go back into AD and we're going to add a user. Open up Active Directory users and computers. And in here under users, you'll add a new one. And this time we'll add John Smith. So type in John Smith. He's going to be our admin too, so we'll add him to the big chief role here. Type in a password you can remember. I've been using the same password the entire time, so you can do the same thing. Just keep it simple. And then let's add another user after we add John Smith to the right domain account, and you do that by going to domain users, adding them in here. So I would browse for this, check names, keep it simple. And then let's also add another user, and we'll call this one like something for the dev, the SQL account. So we'll call it SQL account, and keep the password simple. And we won't make this one a domain admin. We'll just keep it a normal user. Okay, once that's done, let's take a look at our checklist. We've already created the DC. We've already added the Active Directory. Now let's go and add SQL Server. So the same thing. Choose a memory. So go to New in your Virtualbox. Give it the same amount of memory, like 2 gigs. Keep all the settings the same. Maybe update the hard drive to like 25 gigs. And do your normal stuff of installing the Windows OS. And again, I'll just recommend you to do the desktop version of it. So drop it all the way down, data center, desktop version, unless you just are itching to install core. So this will take a few moments. I'll speed this up really quick since we've already been through this. And then once we're done with this, we'll add the Virtualbox guest edition. So we'll just fly through this real quick. Keep everything the same. Now, as we add this to the network and rename it, I want to slow it down just a little bit so that we get the right IP in after we made sure the network setup is done. Okay. This time we're going to use 192.168.10.2 for the IP address. And the preferred DNS is, of course, 192.168.10.1. Okay. Go to Properties here and turn off your firewall, just like we did for everything else. And then we'll rename it to SQL 01. And then the domain, type in the domain of, we've already created it. So it'll be sql.devbox.net. And it's going to be good news here if it pops up. Okay. So then you'll have to type in your JSmith. Remember, he's the big domain account. Okay, we've got to restart it. But you'll see that error message until you get a restart done. And what we can do is go to the command line and do a quick ping for the DC. And that looks good. We'll go ahead and go and create the SQL 02 box, or the SQL 02 VM. So the normal stuff, do new, give it the same password, install Virtualbox guest edition, Now let's slow it down so you make sure we get the right IP in here. So it's 192.168.10.3 this time. Same subnet mask. And then the same DNS server, 192.168.10.1. Okay. And change the name to SQL02. Add it to the domain. Here we go again, SQL.devbox.net. If you get the computer name domain changes screen, that's when you type in the famous John Smith. That's the only person that's powerful enough to change this right now. And it will require a restart. And we're ready. Next thing we'll do is add our SQL Dev VM. So similar steps. SQL Dev is the name. Change the IP. The IP is going to be 192.168.10.4. And the subnet mask is going to be the same. Change the name of it to SQL Dev, and then add it to the right domain account. With the right domain, add it to the right domain. John Smith is the only person who can change it right now. It's a good sign. Means your network is working right. Okay. Ping it just for peace of mind. And now we'll go in, we'll configure the failover cluster. Here's our checklist. So we've done quite a bit. Before we go on with the failover cluster, let's take a look at the checklist. We've already created the DC and installed Active Directory, created SQL 1, 2, and SQL Dev, and joined all those to the domain. So let's configure the failover cluster. We'll do this and add roles and features to to all three, the DC, SQL 01, and SQL 02, and the steps are pretty much the same. This will just take a moment for us to get it installed on all three servers. We don't have to worry about SQL Dev right now, so that one doesn't need to be in the cluster. And again, it's a add roles and features. It's pretty easy. And I'm doing this kind of simultaneously. You don't have to wait and do it one after the other. You can do them pretty much at the same time. Okay. And this time I'm signing on to the DC with John Smith. I'm going to the failover cluster this time. And what I'll do is install the failover cluster by creating a cluster in Actions. Or actually, we need to add the SQL we need to add each of the SQLs to the failover cluster. So I would do it by doing a search for them as opposed to just putting in a name. That way it makes it a little bit easier to configure your cluster. I'll validate it real quick. We'll get some validation errors, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and click next. Take a moment to get the failover cluster installed. Then make sure you put in the name for the network, and we decided it's going to be 192.168.10.5 for the SQL cluster name for the IP. All right, we have the SQL failover cluster installed. Next thing we'll do is install the SQL Server onto our SQL 01 box and our SQL 02 box. So install the ISO just like if it were a CD. Go through the setup on 01 and go through new SQL Server installation. And it should be the developer edition. And all we want to do is install the engine. We don't want to worry about anything else. Now, with 2017, Management Studio is not SQL Server Management Studio is not included in the install, so you'll have to do a separate install of that. So we can do that later on, and really we're only going to do that to the SQL Dev box. So put in the SQL account name, the password that you used earlier. Remember we created that on the DC. And again, sometimes I just browse for it just because you need a domain admin to help you add this to it. And this isn't really about installing SQL Server. There's different configurations that you may want to do for all this. I just want to get us through this real quick. So once you're done installing SQL Server, then you'll want to install SQL Server also onto SQL 02. So it's the same thing. And then you'll want to go in and add the always on setting to the configuration tool. So go into 01, 02. Now we're going to load Management Studio up. So here's the install site. This is what it looked like back earlier whenever I started on this video. Yours will probably look much different from this by the time you look at this, you review this video. Okay. Downloaded it. we want to go back in and add a virtual share. So we go to settings on whichever server we're going to, and go to find the ISO folder. Make sure you have the auto mount and other setting here checked. You want to make sure that the ISO is set and make permanent checkbox is made. And then network discovery, go ahead and click that to turn it on. And eventually you'll see the share in there once that's done. There it is. It's a different kind of a name. Now what you'll want to do is take that share, move it to your local machine, or install it from here. Take just a moment to get this ordered, installed. Okay, go ahead and log in. To Management Studio, here we go. Alright, and here's the part I was talking about. If for some reason you can't make a connection to SQL 01 from your SQL Dev box, then it probably requires a configuration manager setting to go to. So flip on to each of the servers and go to TCP/IP under protocols for Microsoft SQL Server, and go to properties. After you've set it up to put in TCP/IP, go ahead and do a restart. Take a moment and do the same thing onto SQL 02. Make sure it's under the IP. Okay, there we go, and a connection was made. After you've done that with SQL 01 and SQL 02, then we'll go on to the always on setup, the AG setup. Quick look at our checklist. Alright, first things first, let's go ahead and get a database created, a table created, and add a few rows in here. As you can tell, I have a frog table with only 3 rows in it. What I'll do next is I'll back up the database. I'll copy that over from SQL Server 1 over to SQL Server 2. And this is again when our shared, we couldn't have done this without the guest additions, so it's a good thing we installed that already. Let's go ahead and take the backup of the animals database over to SQL 2, and what we'll do is a restore, and we'll do it with no recovery. And some of you might be familiar with no recovery, why we do that. It's similar to the way we configure mirroring. Then we'll give it some endpoints for the listeners. So we'll have to run some of these queries on 01 and some of these on 02. So we're creating an endpoint on 01 first. We'll flip over to SQL 02. We'll run an endpoint on 02. We'll create a login from Windows, and then we'll grant connection on that endpoint for the SQL account. Okay, change over to our SQL 1 box. And then what we'll do is create an availability group on SQL 01 by running this script. Then once we've configured the availability group, we'll alter the availability group and add AG1. Now you can call this AG anything you want to. You can call it, I prefer to keep it simple, and that's what we'll do. We'll alter the database that we created and we'll add it to the AG group 1, AG1. Let's look at the dashboard real quick, see if we see any problems with our dashboard. And this looks real good. There's no latency. It looks like we've set it up. Okay. All right, let's do a quick demo to prove everything out. So back on SQL 01, now remember we're logged into our SQL Dev box. Let's do a quick select. And you can see there's different things in there. What we'll do next is do an insert in there. Then we'll go over to SQL 02. We'll do a select from there. And it tells us the availability group is not accessible. All right, so we have to change our connection. Pay attention to how we do the connection. Go to connect to database. Make sure you type in the database that's associated with this AG. And this connection string parameter is very important to do. Application intent equals read only. Doesn't matter about case sensitivity unless you have a case sensitive database or server. And let's do a select. And there you have it. We're able to do a read from the read intent server. Now let's see if we can do a write there. Same connection, and we can only do reads from there. So that means that we cannot do any writes into there. Let's look at our checklist. We've installed SQL Server. We've created the databases and tables. We've configured availability groups. We've reviewed availability groups dashboard. We've done the demo. Hey, thanks for watching my video. Before you leave, make sure you click down below to subscribe. Bye now.